You're in a class using rainwater in your home landscape. We are talking here about mainly rain barrels, but we're also going to talk about, you know, using other techniques such as passive rainwater harvesting, which we will get into here in this presentation. So just kind of an outline of the topics for today. Obviously, the name of the game today is rainwater harvesting. That's what we're mainly talking about. We're going to start out with some history and some legalities. Now, this section is very, very Colorado based. I'm going to go over some of the history and the law of Colorado. If you're from somewhere else, I'm not sure what the legalities and the rules are, but I'm sure that if you contact your local extension office, if you have extension there, that they will be able to tell you. So then we're going to get into active harvesting, which is using the rain barrels. Active harvesting just means we're storing that water. And if we were having this class in person, we would make a rain barrel. We've done this before where we make a rain barrel together. So I have photos of that process, and we will go over that just so you kind of get inspired of how you might be able to do your own DIY rain barrel. And there's so many ways to do it. So that would just be one example. And then we're going to get into passive harvesting. So how do we use our landscape features to take advantage of the rain that falls in our yards or our landscapes, and then how to kind of integrate both the active and the passive to have just a super water-wise landscape. So let's start off with a little bit of an inspirational quote. "When the well is dry, we know the worth of water," is a quote from Benjamin Franklin. So here in Colorado, I think that we feel this statement pretty good. We have our population here in Colorado has been rapidly increasing for a few years now, but our water supply has not been. So, you know, maybe the well isn't completely dry, but we definitely here feel that pressure and know the worth of water because we have such a high demand and, you know, usually not enough supply. So I'm glad to see that so many people are here and interested in harvesting rainwater to kind of ease that up a little bit. So let's talk about Colorado water law. That might sound boring, but it's actually kind of interesting when it comes to Colorado. So we're looking at Colorado around 1850 here. This is the Wild West when it comes to Colorado water law. We have farmers and ranchers fighting for a limited amount of resources that they need for their farms and their ranches to thrive. So this is for their survival, their family's livelihood, and their prosperity. So there's kind of a quote from this time in Colorado: "Whiskey is for drinking and water is for fighting." And you can see in the photo, these farmers and ranchers are not so peacefully discussing water rights. So in Colorado, the way water rights work is there is a piece of legislation that goes back to, you know, probably the 1800s called the Colorado Doctrine of Prior Appropriation. So the way this doctrine works is it's first in time, first in right. Those people who were first applying for water rights and saying they were going to be putting this water to a beneficial use receive those water rights. If you did it after, then you know, the person who applied first, their water rights get satisfied before the people who applied after. Now they do have to, you know, be putting this water to beneficial use. So farms, ranches, this is an essential part of the doctrine, but kind of imprecise, and there's not, you know, a whole lot of guidance or definitions on it. So it could have potentially in the past gotten a little cloudy as to what that actually meant. Now, if you're from maybe like back east or something like that, water rights work differently. A lot of times water rights are tied to a certain piece of land. And if you know, purchase that land, you also are purchasing the water rights to take water out of maybe a stream or something like that that's on the land. That's not how it works here. If you purchase a piece of land, the water rights are separate. That does not necessarily mean that you have the right to take water even out of a a public body that is going through your land. You need to apply for the water rights separately. And we do have state water courts that administer these rights and oversee these rights. And like I mentioned, senior rights are satisfied before junior rights. So essentially what we're dealing with here, and what we have been dealing with for, you know, hundreds of years, is a lot of demand for this water, but not really enough supply. So rain barrels in Colorado were actually banned for many, many years, actually until 2016, due to concerns about water rights. So, you know, people with water rights were concerned that if people started having rain barrels and holding this water that otherwise would have ran off into the water system and entered, you know, their farm or their ranch, that they wouldn't have as much water to irrigate their crops or whatever beneficial use that they're using it for. So that was a huge concern, and that's why the rain barrels were at one time banned. Now in 2010, CSU did a study that showed that people having rain barrels had little to no effect on the amount of water that was entering the system as runoff. So you can see this table here in this photo. It shows, mainly pay attention to these bottom two rows. In a developed area with no rain barrels, the amount of runoff in gallons is identical to the developed area with rain barrels. So they were really having, you know, no effect on the amount of runoff. So this study really is the thing that led to Colorado legalizing the use of rain barrels. And there are definitely restrictions, and we will get into all of them. But those restrictions are mainly in place, A, for your safety. Some of them are definitely there for you. And then some of them are there to protect the water rights of the people who have them in the state. So let's just start off with this. Rainwater harvesting is not gray water harvesting. Those are different. Gray water harvesting is when we harvest the used water from things in our home, such as bathtubs and sinks and washing machines, and we have a system that kind of pumps that outdoors, and we maybe irrigate some of our plants with that. That's different. The rules are different, definitely depending on where you live. The systems that you need are different, and it's a completely different presentation, probably given by a different person, let's be honest. So this is not gray water harvesting, and they just are commonly confused. So I wanted to just start off with that little disclaimer. So I am not a lawyer at all. I am a horticulture person. So I'm not going to really interpret these laws for you. I have screenshots from the actual law, so you can see the actual language of the law. You can interpret it to how you think it means. Any like big questions on the law itself, I probably won't be able to really answer for you, but I just want to let you know what the law actually states. So let's kind of go over some of this. So in the law, a rain barrel is defined as a storage container with a sealable lid that is above ground, so they're not supposed to be buried, and outside of a residential home, and we're using it to collect precipitation from a downspout of a rooftop. So pretty specific, but then there's also some room for interpretation there as well. Like the container could be a lot of different types of containers, and then we kind of get into the wormhole of, you know, what is a residential home, and we'll talk about that a little bit further here. So how much water can you collect? You can collect no more than 2 rain barrels with a combined storage capacity of 110 gallons or less. So you can't have 3 rain barrels even if the capacity is still at that 110 gallons. You can only have the 2 vessels, and then your maximum amount of gallons is 110. So basically, to get the most rainwater that you legally can, 2 55-gallon barrels is kind of the optimal situation that you're looking for. So where can you collect the rainwater? This is kind of where it gets a little fuzzy sometimes. The rainwater can be collected from the rooftop of a building that is used as a single family residence. So a standalone single family home absolutely can have the two 55-gallon rain barrels and collect rainwater in them. Or if it's a multi-family residence with 4 or fewer units. So like a big apartment building like that's shown in this picture cannot have rain barrels technically. But if it were a duplex or something with 4 or fewer units, you would be able to collect the rainwater. At least that's how I'm reading this. So the law does go on to define a single family residence as a private residence that is a separate building. So that's the easy situation, a standalone single family home, or an individual residence that is part of a row of residences joined by common sidewalls. So here's our single family home, easy. And then here, these two residences, they do share a common sidewall. They are separate residences and they would both be able to have their two 55-gallon barrels. Now, just a little note about HOAs, homeowners associations. The law does specifically state that the homeowners association cannot prohibit you from using rain barrels to collect precipitation. However, they can potentially give you guidelines as far as what the rain barrels need to look like, where you can put them on your property, and things like that. But they can't just tell you no. So how can we use that collected rainwater legally? Again, this one gets a little bit fuzzy. The collected precipitation must be used for outdoor purposes, including irrigation of lawns and gardens, which is really, the main reason that I think people would want to have a rain barrel. Now, a lot of people, ask like, can I water my pets with them? Or can I bring my houseplants outside and then I'm using it outdoors? I don't know. There's a lot of ifs in here, and maybe we'll get into who regulates the law, and maybe they would probably be a better person to ask, but it's just not 100% clear about what that means. But irrigating outdoor lawns and gardens, 100%, totally fine to do. And then you also have to use that collected precipitation on the property from which it was collected. So you can see this house here has its little fence. This water that they collect has to be used on this property. So, if you have a neighbor who doesn't have an interest in rain barrels, technically it's not legal for you to hook up a rain barrel to their downspout and then have a hose going over into your yard. Technically that is not allowed. You shall not use the rain for drinking water. I mean, obviously, right? Please don't do that. Or indoor household purposes, and that there could just be a lot of things that we could ask about that. And I'm not sure exactly what would fall under being legal or not, but that is what the law says. So who regulates this law? The state engineer is technically the one in charge. There are supposed to be resources and further information on the state engineer's website. And that website is right here on the slide, water.state.co.us. So if you want more information on the legalities, that is who you would go to for that. And then as far as who is supposed to be developing the best practices for disease control, mosquito control, this usage guidelines, that would fall under the Colorado Department of Public Health and Environment. So those would be the two agencies that you could get a hold of if you wanted more information on that. So let's see if we have any questions. If anybody has any questions, can we type them into the chat box? And I am going to find the chat box. Here we go. And I will wait a minute and see if we have any questions. Dom, the way I understand it is that yes, you can't hook the rain barrels up to an outbuilding such as like a garage or a greenhouse. As far as can you use the water in the greenhouse? I'm not sure. You could maybe argue that the greenhouse is outdoors. And honestly, I don't think anybody would come knocking at your door if you were using your rainwater to irrigate your greenhouse plants. And also, I see a question from Dom, will this be reposted? I am actually currently recording this, Dom, and I will probably be posting it on our YouTube channel. So just watch our Facebook or our email list for updates on that. Any other questions about the legalities that I probably can't answer for you? All right, cool. Just check in with the host. Everything going okay, Laura, on the participant end? All right. I will assume yes. Okay, so let's move on. We are going to, yep, okay.
Thank you.
Yep, thank you. So let's talk about active rainwater harvesting. This is rain barrels. So the active just refers to the fact that we are collecting the water and we are storing it for future use. That's what we mean by active. So the benefit of a rain barrel is the ability to control the application of the harvested water. We use it when we want it, we use it where we want it. We're not just kind of dealing with wherever the rain falls on our landscapes. We're having a little bit more control over it. Excuse me. So this rain barrel here, there's a big problem with it, the barrel in this picture, and that's that it does not have a lid. And we're gonna go over that, but by law, your barrel needs to have a sealable lid. So let's talk about our storage vessel, AKA our barrel. This is where we're going to divert the water into and where we are going to store the rainwater. So this is our barrel. Safety is a concern on a lot of different levels, and we're gonna go over a lot of safety stuff with the rain barrels. But just generally, it should be secure. A full rain barrel can weigh 400 pounds. If you have kids or pets or even yourself, you do not want that falling. That could be very, very dangerous. And it should be clean. We get issues with mosquitoes, we get issues with algae, and we will go over that, but that definitely can become a safety concern. And then you should follow all the guidelines laid out in the law, which if you would want to look that up is House Bill 16-1005. And we will go over pretty much everything that the law lays out in this presentation, but if you'd like to just read more on it, that's where you'd find it. Always use good safety practices when you're installing your barrel or if you're making your own barrel. Anytime you're using power tools, wear those safety glasses, wear those work gloves, and just be really mindful of what you're doing. If you'd like to DIY a barrel, some ideas on where to find them. You might be able to find cheap barrels from bottling companies. I've had them donated from the Coca-Cola distribution center here in Pueblo. Bakeries sometimes get very large orders of like frosting and things like that in barrels. Delis will sometimes get things in barrels. Feed stores, any like bulk food service place. Car washes will sometimes get soap in large barrels like that. You will want to make sure you know what was in the barrel to begin with, and that no matter what was in it, you clean it out very good before you use it. You know, you could also buy like a large trash can that has a sealable lid. There's really a lot of options for you to be creative with this. Even easier, there are tons of pre-manufactured barrels that you can order online or purchase at a hardware store, and the work's done. So that's even easier. So the House Bill requires the rain barrels to have a sealable lid, like I already said. And this is mainly for mosquito control. We definitely don't want mosquitoes breeding in our rain barrels. That is just going to lead to a problem for you. So it has to have a sealable lid. You are allowed to cut a hole in the lid and attach a fine screen that a mosquito could not fit through. You can also cut multiple holes and attach just one larger piece of screen, as you see in this picture here on this slide. And then the downspout should not be further than 1 inch away from the lid of the barrel. So we don't want, you know, like a couple feet in between our downspout and our barrel. There's going to be a lot of waste that way. It's best to get it within 1 inch of the inlet into the barrel. You also, instead of having your inlet go in the top of the barrel, like it shows in this photo, you can have the inlet go in the side of the barrel, near the top. That would be totally fine too. Excuse me 1 second. My dogs are barking. Hey. The mailman. Sorry about that. Okay. Another joy of working from home. Let's see here. So the bottom line is that your rain barrel should have an overflow outlet. So that's what we see, the kind of second arrow from the top here is an outlet where water can overflow, and we'll get more into overflow, definitely. So you want to have that. If you're looking for a prefabricated barrel, make sure there's an overflow. There's a lot of prefabricated barrels that are not well planned out, let's say. So look for that. You need an inlet for the downspout, obviously. There's got to be a way for the water to get from your roof into the barrel. And then you want to have at least 1, possibly 2 hose spigots. Ideally, the spigots are going to be 8 to 9 inches from the bottom of the barrel so that you avoid sediment. I mean, it's kind of natural. Sediment's going to get in the barrel. You want to have some room for that to settle. So that when you open the spigot, you're not just draining out a bunch of sand and dirt. So 8 to 9 inches from the bottom should be just fine. So that's kind of the storage vessel. And then how do we get the water from the rain barrel into our landscapes? This is a gravity-fed system. I'm sure that there are those of you on the call who have the skills to be able to create some kind of pump and something really fancy to get the water from the barrel to the landscape. For myself and probably some more of you, this is going to be a gravity-fed system, easy and simple. Now you can, I've seen people hook up a drip system to their barrel, but it's not the easiest thing to do. For one, your barrel's probably going to have to be at least 4 feet above the emitters. So you're going to have to raise that barrel up a pretty good amount. And even then, your flow is going to be kind of poor. And if you've ever used a drip system, you know that you need a little bit of pressure to get that water pushed through those emitters. So it can be done. Definitely not the easiest thing to do. The easiest thing is to just hook a hose up to that spigot, open up the rain barrel, set the hose near the base of the plants that you want to be watered, and kind of move it around every few minutes. That's the easiest way. You can also fill watering cans either with the hose or just straight from the spigot. Those are totally fine ways of using the water from your rain barrel, super easy. The pressure is going to be best, obviously, when the barrel is full and when it's elevated. We do suggest that you elevate the barrel, and we'll get into that a little bit more. And like I said, prefabricated, the work's done for you. Just make sure that the design is good. But some of these are pretty cool looking. And, you know, this one here has a little planter on it, so you can add some flowers, and that would just be real easy. Probably a little more expensive, but less time consuming, and, you know, the work's kind of already done for you. So like I said, when you do get a prefabricated barrel, here's your checklist of things you definitely want to have. You need to have the sealable lid because that's the law. Other places it might not be. So there might be companies manufacturing rain barrels that don't have a sealable lid. So definitely look for that. You want proper spigot and drain placement. So definitely, you know, if the drain or the spigot is at the very bottom, that might be not good because you'd be getting too much sediment. So check that out. Ideally, you want it to be a 55-gallon barrel so that you can buy 2 of them and collect your 110 gallons. And there's many styles that exist. So find the style that's right for you. So I kind of mentioned that we want to elevate our barrel. So there are some of the barrels come with stands like this one on the right here that will elevate the barrel for you. You can build a stand out of wood. You can build a stand out of bricks. My barrel that I have is on cinder blocks. But I just, again, will caution you that these need to be super, super steady. You absolutely do not want these full barrels falling down. So make sure that your whatever you're using to elevate the barrel is very, very steady. Now, elevating the barrel, here's a little diagram just to show you. If you, for every foot above the ground you gain 0.43 psi of pressure. So just to give you a little bit of an idea on the kind of pressure math there. And then, you know, having it elevated, it's also a lot easier to connect your hose, I will say. You don't have to bend down quite as far. So those are good reasons to elevate your barrel. Now, we next need to consider how we're going to attach the barrel to the downspout. How are we going to get the water from the downspout into the barrel? So one thing to consider is downspout filtration. I mean, you know, I have lots of trees in my neighborhood. We have to clean our gutters out a few times a year. We don't want all of those leaves clogging up our downspout and our devices that are getting water into the barrel. So there's a few different things you can do. You can see on the left here, there is this kind of metal net contraption that goes in the top of the gutter that will stop leaves and large things from entering. You can have a screen kind of on the other end, at the end of the downspout before it enters the barrel. And this one on the right kind of has like an internal filtration system that's going to screen out very large debris. So that's definitely a good thing to do if you're going to be installing a rain barrel. Now you need to connect it to the rain barrel. So there's a lot of ways to do this, and here's just a few different options. This picture on the left is from a kit. There are a lot of kits that you can buy if you just Google, you know, rain barrel kits. Then you can definitely find a lot of different ones. So this one, this diverter goes in. You drill a hole in your downspout. This diverter goes in. It'll allow the rainwater to go into the barrel until the barrel fills, and then it diverts the water through the downspout like normal. There's a lot of all these different kinds of diverters do similar things. It kind of just depends on your site, the design that you have in mind, how you want this to look on your downspout. If you want to drill a hole in your downspout, if you want to cut your downspout, these are all things to consider. And there's just a lot of ways. You know, you can just cut your downspout and have it pouring straight into your rain barrel. But you have to have a good plan for overflow in that case. So lots and lots of ways to do it. These are just a few of the options. And here's another just kind of photo of somebody else's setup. So they have their upper downspout here coming from their roof, connected to a flexible downspout that is going into a diverter that will divert the water into the barrel until it fills, and then the water will enter the lower downspout and drain just like it would normally if there were not a rain barrel there. So the next step is to integrate that barrel into your landscape. You want to figure out, you know, how am I going to use this water? It's no good to harvest it and store it and then not use it. So definitely have a plan for how you're going to integrate that barrel into your landscape and use it beneficially. So one of the first questions to ask yourself, where do you want to use the water? Consider the water demands of different plants. If you have some very xeric plants, maybe you're not going to be really using your rainwater on them because they don't need a lot of irrigation. You probably might want to use it on some of your higher water demand plants. Aesthetics, you know, maybe your HOA says it can't be in the front, it has to be in the back, or maybe you just don't want it in the front. So think about how it's going to look. Ease of use. You know, you don't want it somewhere where you have to crawl over a bunch of rocks or things like that to get to it. Make it easy to use because you're more likely to use it if it's easy to use. And then probably the biggest one, think of the distance to the plants you want to water. So, you know, if you want to water this tree over here that this yellow arrow is pointing to, You probably don't want to put your rain barrel way on the other side of the house. Same if you want to water these flowers, you don't want to put the rain barrel really far away from it. So definitely consider the distance to the plants that you hope to water. And then, do you have access to a downspout? I mean, this is going to be your limiting factor, right? If you really, really want your barrel over here in this corner, but there's no downspout, I mean, you could potentially extend your downspout over there, or add a downspout would definitely be possible, but think about where your downspouts already are. And can you make those spots work for you? That would be easiest. And then think about your roof geometry. This is something I did not ever consider until I installed the rain barrel. So take a look, you know, like how much of your roof is draining into that specific downspout. Maybe you want to install your barrel where you're getting the most runoff from a roof, or maybe you have way too much runoff from a certain area, so you need to move it to a downspout that gets a little bit less runoff. So take a really good close look at your roof geometry, where your downspouts are located, and how and where they're draining. So this is a neat thing to figure out. This is an equation that will allow you to figure out, using the amount of rain that fell in inches, how many gallons of water are you going to get into your barrel. Sorry for the folks not in America that we're using kind of American units here. I'm sure there another equation exists, and you know, you can find anything on the internet. So what you want to do is you want to take the square feet of your roof. So that's kind of your watershed, or the square, and it's best to take the square feet of your roof that you know is draining into the specific downspout that you're looking at. And that's going to be your first number there. So that's going to be in square feet. And then you're going to multiply that by inches of rainfall. So for that, you know, you might need a rain gauge or something to know how much rain fell. And then we have a little conversion factor of 0.63. That stays the same. And what that is the gallons of water from 1 inch of rain on 1 square foot of roof. So we add that in just to kind of convert all of the feet and the inches into gallons. So we multiply those three numbers together, and then we get the amount of gallons in our barrel. So let's look at an example of that. So let's just say that the square footage of our roof that we're looking at here is 500 square feet, just for the sake of this example. And here's our runoff coefficient, is what we'll call it, is 0.63. Now you can see we have a few different amounts of inches of rainfall, and then how many gallons that gives you in your barrel. So a lot of people, I hear them say, why are you teaching a rain barrel class in Pueblo? It hardly rains here. It's not worth it to have a rain barrel. But it is. If you look here, it doesn't have to rain that much for you to fill your barrel. So if you're on a 500 square foot roof, how much water you need, how much inches of rain you need to fill your 55-gallon barrel is only 0.175 inches. Not even a quarter of an inch will fill a 55-gallon rain barrel. You know, if it rains 1 inch, that's 315 gallons. That's way more than we could ever even collect. So it really, they fill fast, faster than you would think if you haven't had a rain barrel. So that is definitely something interesting to take a look at. So how much money and how much water is this going to save you? Let's take a look at that. So this answer, you know, it depends. It depends on a lot of things. It depends on the hydrology of your roof, you know, like how much is running off from your downspout into your barrel. On your landscaping features, are you know, do you have some landscaping features that are making better use of what you are collecting? The water use of the plants is obviously huge, the size of your lot, and then the local water costs. These all will matter when it comes to how much money are you going to save and how much water will you save. But I'm going to give you an example from Pueblo, Colorado. And you know, you can probably find the data and do this yourself for your own area. But this is a chart of the average amount of precipitation in Pueblo. I believe this was from 2015 or 2016, some year. It's probably pretty spot on with most years. So we're going to look at April to October, because as you can see, though, that's kind of our biggest rainfall months that we have. So before we go into our example, let's make some assumptions here. Let's assume that we can capture and use 40% of the monthly precipitation. Some is going to get lost during large thunderstorm events, whether that's overflow out of your gutters, overflow out of the barrel. There's a lot of things that could happen. So let's assume we capture a little less than half, 40% of the monthly precipitation. And we're also going to assume that we have a roof that is 750 square feet. And that's the amount of roof that we're collecting from, 750 square feet. And then we're also going to assume that the price of water is $2.50 per 1,000 gallons, which was the cost of water in Pueblo, Colorado in 2015. So we will use these assumptions for this example. That came out a little bit blurry, but hopefully you can still see. All this is showing is we took the average precipitation and we took 40% of it. So here's the inches of rainfall that we are assuming that we are collecting in our barrel April through October. So that's what that is there. And then what we did is we plugged those inches into our equation using the 750 square foot collection area of our roof. And these are the amounts of gallons that we capture for each of these months using that 40%. So, you know, you can see in April, we captured 245 gallons of water. And so on and so on here. August, we did good. We captured 429 gallons of water, almost 430. So these are how many gallons we captured in our hypothetical situation. Okay, so here's the one you were waiting for. And I know we're on Zoom. I can't see you guys, but I just can feel your disappointment in these numbers. It's not as much as you may have thought. You know, in April, we're only saving 61 cents. In August, when we collected all that water, we only saved $1.07. So for the one barrel, we saved about $4.57 for the year. So, you know, if we had 2 barrels, we're saving less than $10 a year. It's not about money is basically what I'll say here. We are, you know, it is saving you a little bit of money, and it is absolutely saving a little bit of water. But the reason to have a rain barrel in your yard isn't to save money. If that's why you're here, I'm sorry to disappoint you. But you know, it's not about that really. Using rain barrels in your landscape creates an awareness of water conservation for you, for those in your home, for your neighbors that see you using the rain barrel, for people who come to your house and see the rain barrel. It just creates an awareness that, you know, hey, we should be conserving water. We should be doing what we can to be wise with our water. They promote water-wise landscaping. You're going to be, you know, designing your landscape, if possible, or retrofitting your landscape to use this free reused water. So that, I mean, that's definitely a water-wise thing to do. And people who use rain barrels are more likely to conserve water elsewhere in the home. So it is about more than money. There's a little bit of money savings, not much at all. It's more about creating an awareness and taking action to be more water-wise in your landscape and in your life. So not a whole lot of benefit to our pocketbooks, but there are absolutely benefits to our plants. One, it's water and it's free. It's free water. Let's use it. Water in Colorado is generally soft and low in salt, so it's pretty good quality of water to use on our plants. Also, you know, it hasn't been through like the municipal water treatment plant, so that's it's unchlorinated, which is definitely beneficial to plant growth. And rainwater oftentimes will contain small amounts of nitrogen. So that's why after a big rainstorm, if you're driving along the highway, you'll see kind of a greening effect in the landscape. And that's because of that small amount of nitrogen that's gotten into the plants and kind of perked them up a little bit. So definitely beneficial to use rainwater to irrigate your plants. So let's talk about safety. Like I said, there's a lot of safety stuff to consider when we're thinking about installing a rain barrel. And so one of the first things to consider is storing, mainly how long you're storing it and how you're storing it. So ideally, you want to use that collected rainwater right away within a week if possible. That would be the ideal thing to do. The research has shown that you can store the rainwater for up to a month, but if you hold it longer than a month, you should drain it for a lot of reasons that we'll get into, contaminants and things like that. And then, I mean, also, rain barrels are only relevant if you use them. There's no point to capture this water and store this water and just hoard it. You know, there's no point in that. So let me give you a little example that shows you how harmful that could be to store the water and not use it. So let's say we have a subdivision, like an HOA kind of thing, and there's 1,000 homes. And every one of those 1,000 homes installs one rain barrel. And let's say 20% of those homeowners don't use their rain barrels. They don't use the water in them. They just let it sit there. That's 11,000 gallons not entering back into the water cycle. That's a problem, and that defeats the purpose. So use that water that you collected. That's why you collected it. Now, storage during the winter, this isn't so much storage of water, this is storage of your barrel. You don't want this to happen. That's happening in this photo. That's not good. So during the winter months, you should disconnect your barrel, dry it out, store it upside down with the spigot open so that it doesn't freeze and crack. And that's just kind of the wintertime best practices for your barrel. Now, mosquitoes. This is a huge one. This is one of the main concerns when it comes to safety in rain barrels. And that is because, as you can see in this little life cycle here, mosquitoes, adult mosquitoes lay their eggs on standing water. So if there's some standing water that they can access, they will lay their eggs in it. Absolutely. And that is that's not good. We don't want that. And then these two stages of the life cycle, the larva and the pupa, will live in the water until they become adults and emerge, and then you've just got a mosquito problem. So in urban areas, it's been found that mosquitoes will breed anywhere that holds and stores water for at least a week. That's why we're saying ideally use that water within a week so that we don't have the mosquito problem. This is why the House bill requires the rain barrels to have a sealable lid so that the mosquitoes can't get in and breed, and we don't have more of a mosquito issue now that we allow rain barrels. You got to cover the inlet from the downspout into the barrel, a fine screen that mosquitoes won't be able to enter, and then at least once per month, empty that barrel completely out. That way, if a mosquito did find her way in and lay her eggs, you're going to get rid of it. And if you plan to be away from home for an extended period of time, just go ahead and disconnect that rain barrel from the downspout. That way, you know, something doesn't happen while you're gone. So you're going to have an overflow hose like we've talked about. You want it to be at least 8 feet long. This should prevent mosquitoes who are searching for water to breed in from finding your barrel. You also can attach a piece of fine screen to your overflow hose on either end to prevent mosquitoes from getting in. There's also mosquito dunks that you can buy. They contain a naturally occurring soil bacteria that's ingested by the larva of the mosquito, and then it kills them. So if you want to be super extra careful, you can get that. If you're going to be irrigating edible gardens or something like that, I would definitely read the label and make sure that that's going to be okay for the product that you get. Now, water quality. This can also be a bit of a safety concern. Now, relatively speaking, rainwater in Colorado is of pretty good quality. We don't have you know, a lot of issues with our actual rainwater being contaminated, thank goodness. But one of the biggest problems, especially down here in southern Colorado, is that it doesn't rain a lot. So in between rain events, there's a lot of time for things to build up on the roof, like bird droppings, dust, and other contaminants. And then, you know, the water runs from the roof into the downspout and it brings all those contaminants with it. So that's the bigger problem than that the rainwater itself isn't clean. It's that our roofs are typically kind of dirty. So there's also been tests that have shown that there, depending on what your roof is made out of, there could be heavy metals that are getting from your rooftop into the water. So that's something to consider. To be honest, I wouldn't irrigate edible plants with your rainwater. It's just not worth the risk. You know, use it on your trees and your ornamental shrubs and flowers. It's just a safer bet. So, you know, if you're just using your rainwater on ornamentals, nothing you're going to be eating, it probably isn't a huge concern, the contaminants from the rooftop and stuff like that. But if you really want to make sure that the water is going to be clean, you can install something called a first flush diverter. So you can see in the picture kind of what the whole system would look like. This barrel is probably way bigger than anything we would really have just in a typical home landscape. But this initial tank that's next to the bigger barrel is going to collect the first amount of water from the roof and not allow that to enter the barrel. So that way, you know, that we're assuming that those first few gallons are dirtier. So they go into this other tank and then the rain barrel gets the cleaner water. So here's a little example of, and you can, you know, go to YouTube and find tons of videos how to make these from home using like PVC pipes and a ping pong ball. I've seen a lot of them that use that. So how this one works, this one here is, you know, pretend there's your diverter tank is below this device and the rain barrel is off to the right of it. So the water from the roof flows into this device and it goes into the holding tank that's below this device theoretically, and then, you know, the water level rises, that tank fills, the water level rises, and this little ping pong ball type thing is going to plug up the hole up top. Once it's plugged, then the water will be allowed to go from the roof into the rain barrel. So you can see how that would kind of let those first few dirtier gallons go into a different tank, and then the cleaner gallons go into your barrel. Another safety concern could be algae, and this is a big concern, especially if you have a white barrel. And a lot of the barrels that you would get for free from different, you know, food places are white. So this is definitely something to consider. If you do get an algae breakout in your barrel, you can wash it out with a very, very dilute bleach solution. We're talking like 2%. And then you're going to have to rinse your barrel very, very, very well after washing. And then beware of where you're draining that dilute bleach solution. You don't want to drain that onto your lawn or your plants or anywhere where, you know, your pets or children might get into it. So do be aware of that. And like I said, just be really cautious of watering edible plants with water from a barrel that has had an algae problem. There are some algae that produce toxins that can be harmful to humans. So again, I don't water edible plants with my rain barrel. It's just a safer bet not to. Here's another safety concern, overflow. You can see this pretty dramatic picture here, and this is a pretty common thing that might happen. So not only are you just losing all that water, it's completely pointless, but that is not good for your home's foundation to have all of that water there sitting up next to the home. Also, I'll just point out that the bricks that this barrel is on, that's probably not big enough. That barrel doesn't look too steady. So, so you want to plan for overflow. Make sure you have a big enough hose for your overflow, or make sure you have some kind of system that if we get a huge downpour of rain, this isn't happening. Your barrel's got to have a hole in the top for overflow. You want it to be about 2 to 3 inches from the top of the barrel to allow for, you know, some sediment to settle. You can also have a diverter that directs the overflow back into the downspout. And we kind of looked at some of those downspout diverters already. So that's a totally acceptable way to go as well. Once you have the hole in the top, you need to attach a hose to it, whether that's a garden hose or even better, a big, like wider hose like this one onto this concrete kind of diverter here. This is a really good overflow setup. This person is not going to have problems with overflow. So take a peek at this, this photo here. This is a really good way to set up your 2 barrels if possible. So you can direct your overflow hose from your first barrel, barrel 1 here. You can either direct it right to your landscape, which is kind of taking advantage of passive rainwater harvesting, which we'll talk about, or you can connect your barrels together. So you can use the overflow hose from barrel 1 and connect that to a hole in barrel 2, and then have another hole in barrel 2 that would be for even more overflow. Now, if you wanted to do something like this, barrel 1 does need to be slightly higher than barrel 2 because gravity. So do consider that. So when it comes time to install the barrel, you know, select a downspout. Hopefully you've already been out in your yard and you know which section of your roof is that you want. You may need to cut the downspout or drill a hole in it. That's pretty likely. They are going to have to do one of those 2 things. Here's a whole list of things that you might need when you are installing a rain barrel. And I mean, it depends on how you're doing it, what kind of system you're using. This is just like a list of things that you might need. Different tools. I would definitely use some silicone sealant if you're making your own barrel to seal any you know, spigots or overflow holes. We've done it with and we've done it without, and you want it with, definitely. There's definitely a lot of leakage if you don't use the sealant. So yeah, that's just kind of a list of things that you might need. You might not need some of it, but just kind of some things to consider. So let's look at an example of a little DIY barrel. Actually, I'll take just a quick break and check the chat here and get some questions answered. So what's a good way to measure or calculate your roof square footage? So once you figure out which sections of your roof are draining to the downspout that you want to use, it's just kind of some geometry, a little math. You're going to want to, you know, you probably have to either get up there and measure or just estimate if you're good at that kind of thing. I'm sure not. But, you know, get up there and measure and break it into some squares and you know, kind of use the equation for area to find the area and add up all those different sections to get your kind of rough square footage. Okay, it looks like somebody also suggested using Google Maps. There's a measurement feature. Did not know that. So thank you, Dom. That is very, very interesting. I will have to look into that. What other questions? I'll give you guys a couple minutes, take a quick break, and give you guys a couple minutes to enter any other questions that you have so far about using a rain barrel into the chat. Are there studies from here in Pueblo about the heavy metals? No, the studies that I read, I believe were from Washington State, and they had studies with different types of roofs. So different materials of shingles and different materials that you would use to make a roof out of, and definitely metal roofs were the cleanest. But you know, I don't know. I don't really see houses with metal roofs. It seems like that would be kind of loud when it rains, but they are the cleanest. As far as like Pueblo specific studies, I have not seen any. And yes, that is correct. The heavy metals that I mentioned were from the roof materials, not so much the rainwater. With the rainwater, we're more concerned with the bird droppings and the dust and things like that. Not so much heavy metals from the rain. So if you do have questions, continue to type them in. I'll continue on, and of course, we'll take another little question break here in a minute. So this is, when we do this class in person, which obviously we cannot right now, this is the barrel that we built. So they're definitely not the only way to do it, but this is just to give you an idea and give you some inspiration if you want to make your own rain barrel. So here's the barrel. I went and picked it up from the Coca-Cola distribution center here in Pueblo. It smelled like Dr. Pepper, so I rinsed it out really, really good, and then this is what we were left with, and this is where we started. So step one is we install the spigot. So the supplies you're gonna need were a drill, some kind of marker, a small hole saw. So the hole saw I used here was a 1 1/4 inch hole saw, a threaded rubber seal, a spigot, and the silicone sealant, like I mentioned. Now, this was from a kit. I ordered a kit that came with everything but the barrel and the drill, basically. And, you know, it had all these different parts in it. And you can definitely get these kits, you know, online, or I haven't really seen a kit in a hardware store, but you can definitely get them. They exist. So one thing about the kit I will say is I didn't love the plastic spigot. It works, but they are easily damaged. If you have a dog that likes to chew things like mine does, it won't last long. So if you can find like a brass spigot, that would be better. But anyway, what I did was I measured 8 or 9 inches up from the bottom of the barrel. I marked it with the marker, and then using the 1 1/4 inch hole saw, I drilled the hole. And then I inserted this threaded rubber seal by kind of pinching it into a U shape and inserting it into the hole. And then I threaded the spigot in until it was flush and the outlet pointed down. And I also used some silicone sealant here, just to make sure everything's nice and watertight. All right, step 2. Oops, sorry about that. Step 2 is that we're going to install the fill hose. So in this design, I didn't cut a hole in the lid for water to enter the barrel. I used, the kit came with this hose. So this is the fill hose. So I needed that drill and that marker again, and this time an 1.5 inch hole saw, another rubber seal, the fill hose, and of course the sealant. So I marked where I wanted my fill hose to be near the top. Consider your site. You don't want to just do this blindly. You want to consider like what side of your downspout do you want it on. Consider how high it's going to be once you have it elevated. So probably best to do this on site where you're actually going to be using it. So I used the hole saw, I drilled a hole at the mark, and then I inserted that rubber seal again, and then I inserted the fill hose into the hole. This was hard. It was a very snug fit, and it took some finesse, we'll say, to get that hose into the seal. But we got it in, and that's what it looked like. And then we attached this little thing that came in the kit called a dam diverter. So for that, we just, you know, popped the diverter on the end of this corrugated fill hose, and that was that. We also, I guess I could have taken this out for this class, but we had do not drink stickers just to make sure. You never know. So then we get to installing the barrel onto the downspout. So here's a kind of up close picture of how that went. And this is from the kit that I used. So I had another hole saw, a 2 1/8 inch hole saw, and I had my barrel complete with the hose and the down diverter. So this is where you definitely, or I'm gonna go to the other slide where I have the directions, but that's the picture. It'll be on the other slide in a smaller form. But you want to mark the downspout where you want to install the hose. It's got to be higher than the level of the fill hose because, again, gravity. And then you want to take into account your elevated base. So you definitely want to do this like on site with your barrel right there. So using that hole saw, drill a hole at your mark. If you have a downspout with a narrow side, it's best to do it on that end. Insert the down diverter with the cup facing up. If you have a diverter like this, you want the cup facing up, and then use self-tapping screws to attach that diverter onto the downspout. Attach the fill hose. If you need to cut your fill hose, if you ever use a corrugated hose like this, you want to do it at a non-corrugated spot, ideally. So step 5 is kind of optional. You can install a drain at the very, very bottom if you want to have a way to completely drain it out. Not, you know, you do have the spigot and stuff, so not totally necessary, but it is nice to have the drain. So for this, you need a drill, hole saw of the correct diameter. That's going to depend on the size of the drain. So you want to match that up. A threaded drain, we got a brass drain for this. A drain cap so that you can seal it up, an O-ring, and a nut for the inside, and then of course that silicone sealant. So this was about 4 inches from the bottom of the barrel below the spigot. I used the hole saw, drill the hole, attach the O-ring, you know, using my sealant of course, and then attach the nut on the back end. So unless you have like super skinny long arms, you might have to cut the lid off to get the nut on the back of the drain. And that's okay, you know, cut the lid off however you're able to, and then just be sure to reattach it, because obviously the house bill does require a sealable lid. This step is also kind of optional, to paint it. So we talked about the algae. If you have a barrel that's painted and we can let less light in, that's better for algae growth. So you can paint it. If you're not artistic, you can also buy barrel wraps online. That's just like something you can slip over your barrel. Alternatively, clean it often and try to place it in the shade if you don't want to do either of those two things. They are optional, but it makes it look kind of cool, and it does help with the algae. All right, cool. So what questions, we're going to move into the passive rainwater harvesting, which is not using rain barrels. So what final questions do we have about rain barrels? I'll give you guys a couple minutes to get those in the chat. All right, cool. I'm not seeing anything coming in yet, but if something comes up, type it in there. I will see it eventually and get you answered. So let's move on and talk about passive rainwater harvesting. So passive rainwater harvesting is taking advantage of the water that falls in your landscape, but not using a vessel to store it. We're just doing things with our actual the elements in our landscape to take advantage of the water and get it where we want it, and get it to kind of stick around a little longer, to give it time to sink in. So, I mean, this is not new. This has been a pretty hip thing to do in landscapes in the recent years, but this is not a new concept. This is an age-old practice. Ancient civilizations used some of these kind of techniques to take advantage and grow crops and things like that. You might also hear this referred to as earthworks, so managing the water where it falls or where it flows. Waffle gardening is something that has been done for many centuries, and you can see in the picture, this is waffle gardening, so kind of creating these little square containers where when the water does fall, it'll kind of hold it there, and then planting in those little squares so that the water can seep down into the plant, and then the plant could make the most of that water where it actually falls. So passive rainwater harvesting, a little definition, is diverting water over land to vegetated areas for immediate use. So we're looking at the 3 S's here. We want to slow it down, spread it out, and sink it down. Those are the goals of passive rainwater harvesting. And then you integrate that into your landscape. So these are kind of the main elements of passive rainwater harvesting, the main things to consider. So gutters and downspouts that's the easiest thing. You know, you get a downspout extension and you divert it over to your flower bed, or you know, you kind of just are guiding those downspouts so the water goes where you want it to and where it can be used by plants. And then swales, berms, French drains, and bio-infiltration gardens, also known as rain gardens. So we'll talk about each one of those in a little bit more detail. So before you start kind of trying to figure out how you can take advantage of passive rainwater harvesting in your landscape, you should make a flow map. So something like this little picture that I have here, you want to look outside when it rains, or get your raincoat and your boots on and get out there and see, where is the water flowing when there is a rain event in my landscape? Where is it already naturally flowing, and how can I take advantage of that? Pay attention to paved areas, pay attention to your downspouts, pay attention to how it comes off your roof. And then what can you add to your landscape to kind of keep that water more on your property, or make it go somewhere where it can be used by your plant life. So, you know, it's best, you got to do this because you don't want to just blindly do it. We want to find where that water naturally is going and just take advantage of that. That's much easier than trying to force the water to go the way you want it to go. So swales are kind of indentations in the land that are going to spread the water horizontally on contours. So there's one of our S's, spread. So you can see the diagram here, these kind of lower areas in this landscape, the water is able to spread horizontally along them. And then some real life examples. So these kind of little like dry creek beds are really popular, and I think they're so cute in a landscape. So that's what it is, you know, it's a swale where the water is probably, there's some kind of downspout or something at the beginning of these swales, and then there's probably a slope or something like that, so the water can follow that natural path of least resistance, and then you're able to kind of slow it down, let it sink into the water, and let all these adjacent plants actually use that water. Berms, and a lot of times berms and swales, they kind of go together. You know, you need that high end to make the low contour area. So a berm, aka a micro basin, this is a raised area that we can use to slow the water. So there's another one of our S's. So, you know, you can use, these are just some little horseshoe shaped examples, how you can kind of pair them up and make these little berms work so that they can slow the water down and keep it on your property a little bit longer, giving it a chance to sink into the ground. Now, something to keep in mind about berms, if you're building a berm, you don't want it to just be like this sudden hump in the landscape. You want a very gradual slope. It's better for the slowing of the water, and then B, it just appears as a more natural part of your landscape. So that's if you're building a berm, that's a more attractive and more useful design. French drains. So typically French drains are used to move water away from like the foundation of a house. So what it is it probably comes off of your downspout, and then it's going to be at a slope, and then you're going to have a perforated pipe so that the water could exit that perforated pipe and kind of spread out and sink into the ground, like is shown in these two diagrams here. And here's what the perforated pipe would actually look like, and then just another little diagram of how you can kind of install a French drain system. This is a little more involved. It's a little bit more work, but you know, especially if you're doing like a new construction or something, would be really cool to have. And you know, this could be under your lawn or under a garden or something like that, and would be really useful. And then my favorite, the bioinfiltration or the rain garden. These spread the water out, they slow it down, and they sink it down. We're getting all 3 S's with the rain garden. And you can, I don't know if you can tell, but this picture, this rain garden is kind of in like a little bit of an indentation. So the rain is able to kind of drain into that and kind of stay there and slow down and sink down. So rain gardens, they use the plants, obviously. They use the natural soil. You might have some natural mulch in there. When you have good plant life, good healthy soil, and you're using mulch, you're naturally going to have soil microbes in the soil. These are all going to work together to slow down this water, to treat that stormwater, and to treat the stormwater runoff. So it's actually helping with like water quality kinds of things too. This is modeled after a natural ecosystem. You're keeping the water on site to use in your garden. You know, using those soils and microbes, you can reduce heavy metals, excess nutrients that could pollute the stormwater system, bacteria and other pollutants, which, you know, protects our streams and our lakes. And we're also helping to replenish groundwater supplies. So a rain garden is very, very useful in a lot of ways. So, you know, you want to locate your rain garden in an area where the rainwater is already kind of naturally occurring. Plan it like the river flows, the path of least resistance. Where's the water already going? I'm going to install my rain garden here so that the rain will run off into my garden and be able to be used by the plants in my garden. Now, you want to keep your rain garden at least 10 feet away from buildings, 35 feet away from septic tanks, and 50 feet away from water wells, just for safety concerns. But here's a nice little diagram. You can see that the gutters and the downspouts are kind of, it looks like they have some kind of underground pipe that's flowing down into the rain garden. We have a berm on each side to kind of hold that water in. Native plants are great to use in a rain garden because they're kind of used to that, these like wet and dry cycles. And if that's the only way they're getting irrigated, a native plant would be good with that. And then this kind of system will encourage these plants to have a really deep root system. And big roots are, I mean, healthy plants. So that's great. So, you know, when you first plant your rain garden, even if you have like very xeric plants, native plants, you are going to have to probably give them a little bit of supplemental water until they get established. Once they get established though, if they're water-wise plants, you should be good to go. And you know, they should be able to just wait for it to rain. And like I said, these native plants are adapted to live in those kinds of conditions. So if you see plants that are labeled as water-wise or xeric, those are good plants for your rain garden. And if you don't know about or you haven't checked out Plant Select, you should. PlantSelect.org is an amazing website. Plant Select is a program that tests plants, and they release certain varieties of plants that have been shown to thrive in Colorado. And we have kind of rough gardening conditions for those who aren't from here. So these plants have been shown to thrive here. Check out Plant Select. They have some tools to even design a garden. They have some pre-designed little garden packages that you can look at. And these are plants that you definitely want to look for. And you can also find on their website vendors in your area where you can get Plant Select plants. So definitely check those out. And all of these elements can work together. So this picture is supposed to represent, you know, I have my little rain barrel up here, and then maybe the overflow goes into this swale that has berms on each side and then ends up pooling in this rain garden at the end. So, you know, you don't have to just choose one thing. All of this can work together, and you can end up making a really beautiful, really water-wise landscape using all of these different elements. And you should use all of them if possible. So I will check the chat and keep the questions coming. And then, you know, if you want to get a hold of me with further questions, my email address is here. So feel free to get a hold of me. Let me pull up the chat. I'm actually really quick gonna, I'll keep sharing the screen so you guys can get my email. So let's see. Can swales get problematic with weeds? If so, how to manage that? They could, definitely, because you know they're going to be getting a little bit of extra moisture. Mulch, keeping them, you know, if you have like a gravel mulch or something like that in your swale, that will definitely help. Or if you're planting in your swale, getting some good native plants established would kind of help to outcompete those weeds. So those would be two ways to potentially deal with that. Do the French drains get clogged? That's a good question. I haven't personally used them. I would imagine that they could. And I think if I go back to the photo with the French drain, 1 second, yep, right here, there is a drain pipe wrapped with filter cloth. So I think there is like a filtering cloth that you can get so that those perforated holes won't get clogged, and that would probably be the proper way to do that. Let's see, if you were starting from our clay, do you have a suggestion for a soil / substrate replacement for a rain garden? Yeah, Dom, you know, if you're using like native plants, it probably isn't going to be a big issue, the soil that we have here, because, you know, they're adapted to that type of, we have very heavy, very alkaline soil here. So if you're using plants from this area, that's not going to be a big problem. But what I would suggest is, I mean, I would suggest to get a soil test if possible, so you can kind of see what's going on in your soil, because it's just hard to know otherwise. But I think, you know, it couldn't hurt to just add some organic matter in the form of like a compost and kind of mix that in if you're making a new garden area, just to kind of bump up that organic matter a little bit. From John Powell. Hi, John. Where to find a list of plants to use in rain gardens in Pueblo and Colorado Springs? You can find some really good plant lists, for one, on plantselect.org. And then if you go to the CSU Extension website, I would check out the, there's a plant list that is perennials for Colorado gardens, and check out the ones that are marked as low to moderate water usage. And then there's also a couple of like water-wise or xeriscaping plant lists. Any of those plants would do very, very well. And anything like native, which I know, John, you definitely probably know a lot of those natives, would be good to use in the rain garden. Absolutely. From Christina, any issues with mosquitoes from berms and swells? No, I don't think so. Because that water is not going to be standing. We want the water that enters the swales to be able to sink into the ground. So it shouldn't be standing water for any significant amount of time. So you shouldn't have issues with mosquitoes from the swales. John, okay, answer the question. Good to hear it, John. Okay, we put up a shed in our community garden, but it doesn't have any guttering down pipe attached to it. Any tips for attaching something to catch water? Yeah, that's going to be a tough one without the gutters and the downspouts to actually kind of divert that and kind of like concentrate it to a certain area. Otherwise, you know, you're kind of dealing with it running off the roof down the whole length of the roof. Now, if you could have some kind of containment device that ran the length of the roof and caught it that whole way down, that could work. Getting the gutters would probably be best. It would be tough without them, for sure. What else? Any final questions?